What would you do if your own parents planned a dream vacation to Hawaii, then told you you're not invited but you can babysit instead? That's exactly what happened to me, until I uncovered a secret that changed everything. Let's just say when they came back, their house didn't belong to them anymore. If you love true stories of betrayal, revenge, and unexpected twists, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happened next. I stood by the grill, flipping another batch of burgers as the scent of charred meat clung to my skin like second nature. The backyard shimmered in soft golden light, strung with fairy lights that swayed gently in the humid Charleston breeze. Laughter and music spilled from the Bluetooth speaker set near the pool, and nearly 30 guests mingled around with cocktails and paper plates stacked high. It was beautiful if you ignored the sweat trickling down my back and the ache in my shoulders from lifting tables before dawn. My name is Christina, 33, and the eldest child of Robert and Margaret Halstead. You wouldn't know that if you saw me today. You'd probably assume I was the caterer. I had started the prep work at 6 a.m. sharp, dragging folding chairs from the garage, pressure washing the patio, hanging twinkle lights from the oak tree that had stood in our yard longer than I've been alive. The flowers, arranged by me. The homemade potato salad that everyone complimented. My recipe. The ice that kept everyone's drinks cold. Hauled by me 3 bags at a time. Lisa, my younger sister, lounged on a wicker recliner, sipping some fancy lavender lemonade cocktail her husband mixed for her. She wore a flowy summer dress, perfectly manicured toes peeking from her sandals, like she'd just stepped out of a lifestyle blog. Jack, our youngest sibling, laughed with the kids near the pool, tossing a foam football around with the confidence of someone who'd never had to plan a party in his life. No one asked if I'd eaten. No one offered to help. No one noticed I hadn't sat down all day. Margaret, the woman I call Mom, floated between guests like a southern belle, offering deviled eggs and smiles, making sure everyone was just delighted to be here. She passed right by me as I refilled the slider tray and didn't even glance at my face. Only the stain on my apron seemed worthy of a comment. You should change before more people arrive, she said, not bothering to slow down. You look hot. Thanks, Mom, I murmured, forcing a smile. I caught my reflection in the patio door. A woman wearing exhaustion like a second skin. Hair frizzed from the humidity, hands smelling like onions and Worcestershire sauce. A part of me, a quiet part buried under years of dutiful silence, whispered, "You don't belong here. Not like this." The guests began settling at the long tables we'd set under the oak tree. I caught glimpses of floral centerpieces I had arranged the night before, down to the last ribbon. Someone complimented them. Lisa beamed and said, "Thank you," like she'd made them herself. I didn't correct her. I never do. The sun dipped lower. Lights came on. Fireflies danced lazily along the garden edges. Then, as if on cue, Dad tapped his wine glass with a fork. The chatter quieted. Robert Halstead, my father, stood with one arm wrapped around my mother, his voice deep with pride. "Everyone," he said, "thank you for joining us tonight. 35 years with this amazing woman. I couldn't have asked for more. And to celebrate this milestone, we've planned something special." The crowd leaned in. My heart quickened. "Next week," he announced, "we're all going on a family vacation to Hawaii." Cheers erupted. Someone clapped loud enough to startle a toddler. Lisa squealed, hugging her husband. Jack whooped and shouted, "I knew it." I stood frozen. A slow, warm wave of hope crept up my spine. Why, a vacation. Maybe this was for all of us. I wiped my hands, walked to the table and asked with a smile, "When are we leaving?" "I'll have to let work know." That's when the air shifted. Subtle, like a silent alarm going off. Eyes darted. Conversations died mid-sentence. My father's expression dimmed. His gaze cooled like a switch had been flipped. "You don't need to know," he said slowly, clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You're not coming. You're not coming." The words sliced through the garden air, sharper than any knife I'd used that day. For a second I thought maybe I'd misheard him. Maybe the music had distorted his voice, maybe he'd said something else. Anything else. But then I saw the look in his eyes. The finality. The judgment. My mouth parted slightly but nothing came out. I turned to my mother, silently asking for clarification, for support. Anything. But she only gave a dismissive shrug, as if this decision had been obvious, logical, expected. "Someone's got to stay with the kids," she said like she was explaining why the milk ran out. Lisa didn't even look at me. She was too busy squealing into her husband's chest, already pulling up Instagram to check weather forecasts in Honolulu. Jack was fist-bumping his buddies near the beer cooler, laughing at some joke I wasn't part of. The silence around me didn't last long. People returned to their plates, their chatter bubbling back up like nothing had happened. Only this time the laughter felt louder, more distant, like I was underwater watching the whole scene play out behind a pane of glass. I felt my hands trembling. I clutched the dish towel a little tighter, pretending I needed to wipe something. Anything. I needed an excuse to stay upright because I could feel the sting building behind my eyes. And I refused to cry in front of them. I slipped away from the table and made my way to the porch. No one stopped me. Not a single soul even called after me. I might as well have been the breeze rustling the napkins. Outside, the sky had dimmed into a soft indigo. The fairy lights blinked quietly behind me as I sat on the steps, staring at the overgrown hedges I'd trimmed myself that morning. My heart pounded like it was trying to break free from my chest. "You're not part of us." That wasn't just a practical decision. It was a verdict. A sentence. My own father had declared, in front of a yard full of relatives and friends, that I was not included in the family. Not worthy of a ticket. Not worthy of a seat at the table, literally or figuratively. And it wasn't the trip that hurt the most. It was what the exclusion represented. I was good enough to organize their anniversary, but not good enough to celebrate with them. I was reliable enough to trust with their grandkids, but not fun enough to share paradise with. I was the family's safety net, not its daughter. I thought back to the little things over the years. Every holiday where I stayed late to help clean while Lisa left with foil-wrapped leftovers. Every Mother's Day brunch I paid for while Jack forgot to call. Every time I'd been told, "You're just better at handling things," like it was a compliment, but it always came with more labor, never more love. I remembered when I was offered a scholarship to study in Paris at 21. I was ready, passport in hand, dreams bigger than this town, but then Dad had his stroke. Mom cried, Lisa panicked, and suddenly it just made sense for me to stay. "Just a semester," they said. "We'll manage after that." I stayed the whole year. Then the next. Then I just never left. No. They didn't even blink as they cut me out. I opened my phone almost on instinct and scrolled through old photos. Thanksgiving dinners I cooked from scratch. Birthday cakes I baked for nieces and nephews whose names I wasn't even sure they remembered. A Christmas photo. Lisa in matching pajamas with her kids, Jack holding up a beer and me in the back half cut off holding a tray of cookies. I was always in the background. Always. The injustice burned so hot in my chest it made me nauseous. Not just because of tonight, but because I had allowed it. Year after year I had tolerated it. Dressed it up as duty, as being the good daughter. I had thought if I just kept showing up, kept giving, kept working, they'd finally see me. They never would. And now I was done. I stood up from the porch, pulled the greasy apron over my head, and walked to my car parked just beyond the driveway floodlight. I didn't even bother saying goodbye. I didn't need to. They wouldn't notice I was gone. Not until the garbage wasn't taken out or the leftovers spoiled. As I drove down the familiar streets of our neighborhood, one thought rang louder than the rest. If I'm not part of this family, then I'm not responsible for saving it anymore. The drive home felt endless, though it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes. Every red light gave my mind more space to wander, to unearth the skeletons I'd buried under years of silence. And Lord, there were plenty of them. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the ignition and just sat there. The hum of the cooling engine was the only sound in the car as I stared at the porch light flickering above my front door. This house wasn't much. Modest, slightly crooked windows, porch steps that creaked, but it was mine. Paid for with overtime hours, side hustles, and the kind of budgeting that meant saying no to dinners out and new shoes. No one had helped me buy it. Not my parents. Not my siblings. Just me. I thought about the last time anyone in my family had been here. Probably 3 Christmases ago when I hosted dinner because Mom didn't feel like cooking and Lisa said her place was too chaotic. I'd made everything from scratch. Turkey, stuffing, 3 types of pie. They left early because Lisa's kids got bored and Jack wanted to beat traffic. They didn't even help clean up. That night I cried into a sink full of dishes. And that wasn't the worst of it. Not even close. I remembered being 21 a lifetime ago when the acceptance email for the Fulbright program landed in my inbox. I was shaking when I opened it. France. A full scholarship. Research. COVID. It was everything I had worked toward in college. Everything I had wanted. Then Dad had the stroke. One moment we were planning a bon voyage party. The next I was feeding him soup while Lisa couldn't handle hospitals, and Jack was too busy with finals. I gave up the program without a second thought. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd apply again the next year. I never did. There was no thank you. No one ever said, "You saved us." They said, "It just made sense. You were available." That phrase haunted me. You were available. As if my availability nullified my dreams. As if being single, childless, and reliable was a choice I had made to serve them. I paid off part of Jack's student loans because he called me crying at 2 a.m. He never paid me back. I watched Lisa's twins for 2 weeks when her nanny quit and her husband couldn't take time off. He sent me a $40 gift card to Olive Garden. I paid the copay on Mom's knee replacement when her insurance didn't cover it. I still remember her exact words when I offered, "That's sweet but expected. You don't have a family of your own to worry about." I don't have a family of my own because I've spent my adult life being theirs. The truth was bitter and cold, like drinking ice water too fast. I had been raised to believe family meant loyalty, service, sacrifice. What they didn't tell me was that some families demand everything and give nothing in return. I walked into the house and dropped my purse on the kitchen counter. The silence was thick. Heavy. I wanted to scream into it. But instead I opened a cabinet, pulled out the old photo album my grandmother had given me before she passed and flipped through the pages. There were baby pictures of me. Birthday cakes with candles. My graduation cap, crooked and slightly too big. Grandma had written captions in her neat cursive. My Christina, age 3. Already helping in the kitchen. Graduated top of her class. So proud. No one else ever looked at this book. When Grandma died, she left handwritten letters to each grandchild. Lisa's was full of praise. Jack's was encouraging. Mine was a novel. Pages long. She wrote, "You see people no one else sees. You love people who don't always love you back. That's your gift. But please don't let them drain it." I should have listened to her then. But I'm listening now. For the first time in years, I closed the album and placed it gently on the table. I looked around the room at the chipped walls, the mismatched furniture, the quiet. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And for once I let that feel like enough. I wasn't the one who should be ashamed. I wasn't the one who failed the family. They failed me. And I was done pretending otherwise. The next day I told myself I was fine. I brewed coffee, folded laundry, even vacuumed the living room like everything was normal. But something had shifted. I could feel it in my chest. Tight, buzzing. The kind of quiet anger that doesn't explode. It simmers. It grows legs. Around noon, a message popped up on my phone. It was from Jack. "Hey, can you check the spreadsheet from yesterday's meeting? I think I forgot to list who's bringing sunscreen for the kids." My fingers froze above the screen. What spreadsheet? What meeting? I scrolled up through our group chat, which I rarely checked because it mostly consisted of Lisa sharing overpriced Pinterest recipes and Mom reposting blurry chain prayers. Nothing new there. But Jack's text clearly wasn't meant for me. It was meant for Lisa. Maybe Mom. But not me. Curious, and with a dread blooming in my gut, I texted back. "What meeting?" He didn't reply. 4 hours. By evening, my curiosity had fermented into suspicion. I knew my family well. If something involved me directly and no one told me, it wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. That night, while doom scrolling through Instagram, I got my answer. Lisa posted a story. Just a quick video panning across Mom and Dad's living room. There they were. My parents, Lisa and her husband Jack, and even Aunt Meredith sitting around the coffee table with pens, notepads, and a laptop open. Laughing. Making checklists. In the background, I could hear Lisa saying, "Christina can handle the grocery list and get the kids snacks. Oh, and she'll need to pick up some Dramamine for Ava. She gets carsick." Carsick? Ava's 6. I'd driven her to soccer practices more times than I could count. No one had ever mentioned motion sickness before. And they were planning for a drive. To the airport? To a hotel? Either way, it wasn't my business anymore. They had made that clear. And yet, there they were, assigning me tasks. As if I were the family assistant, not a member. as if I were a name on the whiteboard with a list of chores pinned beside it. The next morning, Jack finally replied, "Sorry, that was meant for Lisa. You don't need to worry about it." I didn't even respond, because I was worrying about it. Not because I cared about Dramamine or shopping lists, but because my family had taken the final step, from quietly taking me for granted, to planning behind my back as if my consent didn't matter. I wasn't just being excluded from their joy, I was being expected to serve it. Quietly, silently, gratefully. I called Lisa just to see what she'd say. She picked up on the third ring, chipper and distracted. "Hey, sorry I didn't text you back. We were up late working on the logistics. You know how Mom gets with her packing lists." "So you had a meeting?" I asked flatly. "Oh, just a casual thing," she laughed. "Don't be weird about it." "Weird?" "Yeah," she said like I was being ridiculous. "You always get so sensitive. I mean, we just figured you'd help out like always. No big deal." "No big deal." "Lisa," I said steady and slow, "I wasn't invited. You held a meeting about a trip I'm not even going on, and the only context I got was an accidental text from Jack." He paused for a beat. Then casually, "Well, you're not coming but you're still family. We figured you'd want to contribute. You've always been so good at handling things." I didn't respond. Not when she added, "And honestly, with your schedule, it's not like you had plans anyway." Not when she said, "Don't turn this into a drama." Because what I heard loud and clear was this: "You're not invited, but you're expected to work. You don't get a seat at the table, but you'd better be in the kitchen. You don't matter, but you'd better not complain." When the call ended, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there in the dark of my living room, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. And for the first time in my life, I let that rage grow roots. A few days after that call with Lisa, I started making plans. Not out of vengeance, at least not at first, but out of self-preservation. I couldn't keep orbiting a family that treated me like a backup generator. Always running, never celebrated, only noticed when I went silent. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into my long-neglected savings account. The one I'd built slowly over the last decade, hiding away a little each month like tucking pieces of a lifeboat beneath a sinking ship. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to leave. Enough to restart somewhere quieter, somewhere colder. Somewhere I could disappear into peace. But when I logged in, my stomach dropped. The balance was $3,200 lower than I remembered. I refreshed the page. Same number. My eyes scanned the transaction history, heart pounding. There it was, 3 withdrawals made over the last month. 2 were small, $400 here, $500 there. The third was for $2,300. All under the same name. Margaret Halstead, my mother. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I hadn't touched that account in almost a year. And then I remembered she still had access. Back in college, I'd added her as a co-owner in case of emergencies. At the time it made sense. I was young. Trusting. I never removed her because I never thought she'd actually use it. Not without asking. I called the bank to confirm. The representative was polite, too polite, explaining the withdrawals had been made in person. All legal, he assured me. She's a listed account holder. I asked for the locations. One was near her favorite grocery store. Another near the strip mall where Lisa's kids took karate. The last? A luxury travel agency 2 towns over. That's when it hit me. The tickets. The deposits. The meeting I wasn't invited to. She used my savings, for their trip. I sat in my kitchen, the screen still glowing, the truth screaming at me in silence. My hands trembled. My vision blurred. I wanted to throw something, scream, cry, but all I could do was sit there stunned. I called her. She picked up on the second ring, her voice chipper. "Christina, I was just thinking about you. Did you see the matching Hawaiian shirts I sent for the kids? Lisa found them on Etsy. Adorable, right? I checked my savings account today," I said, skipping any preamble. "Why did you take money out of it?" Pause. Then a casual, almost amused, "Oh honey, don't be dramatic." I didn't speak. She sighed like she was being inconvenienced. It was just a small amount. We needed a little extra cushion for the trip. Flights were more expensive than expected, and the hotel required a deposit. "You stole from me." "Oh come on," she snapped. "I didn't steal. My name's on the account." You gave me access. For emergencies, I said coldly. And this is a family event. A milestone. Do you think those just pay for themselves? I laughed. Bitter. Ugly. A family event I'm not even invited to. There was another pause. Then she said in that same clipped tone she used when I was a child with a scraped knee and no time for tears, Christina, you're single. No kids. No responsibilities. You've always been more available. You'll be fine. Let your siblings enjoy something for once. Something inside me cracked. Do you hear yourself? I said. You stole my money. Planned a trip without me. Assigned me to babysit like I'm some live-in au pair. And now you're justifying it because I don't have a husband or a baby. Oh, for God's sake, she snapped. Don't twist everything. We've all made sacrifices for this family. No, I said, voice rising. I made sacrifices. You made assumptions. You assumed I'd always be here, cleaning up your messes, watching your grandkids, patching up everyone else's problems. But here's the thing you never asked. You just took my time, my energy, my youth, and now my damn money. Silence. You don't talk to your mother like this, she hissed. No, I said. I don't. Not anymore. And I hung up. For a long time after, I just sat there staring at the wall. I thought of every moment I let things slide. Every birthday I spent alone while they celebrated Lisa's kids. Every time I said it's okay, when it absolutely wasn't. I had been quiet for 33 years. But not anymore. That night I didn't sleep. My mind kept circling the same truth like a dog pacing a fence it suddenly realized had no gate. They'd crossed a line. No, they'd crossed dozens. This was just the one I finally stopped pretending not to see. They thought I would stay quiet. That I would swallow it. Like I always had. Like they had trained me to. But the truth was they didn't know me anymore. Or maybe they never really did. And they certainly didn't know the one thing I had never told them. I owned the house they lived in. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Wiggly. It happened years ago, quietly, almost by accident. When Grandma passed, her will left behind more than some jewelry and old quilts. Turns out she'd been the silent co-owner of my parents' house. They had convinced her to co-sign the mortgage decades ago when Dad's credit was a mess after a failed business. She agreed reluctantly. But instead of letting them refinance later, Grandma held on to her ownership. Just in case, she told me once over tea. I thought it was paranoia. Now I knew better. Her will passed everything she owned to me, including her 51% ownership of the house. And after 6 months of probate and a few lawyer meetings they never asked about, I had it. Quietly. Entirely. No one knew because I never acted on it. I kept paying the property taxes out of my own pocket, automatically, anonymously, because I thought, maybe someday I'd tell them. Maybe they'd thank me. Maybe we'd all sit down and laugh about it. But after everything, well, they didn't deserve the house. They didn't even deserve the porch swing I built with my bare hands. So I made an appointment with my lawyer. Mr. Carlton was an old friend of Grandma's. He didn't blink when I said I wanted to initiate the sale of the house. I've been waiting for this, he said with a chuckle. Your grandmother always said this day would come. I signed the paperwork that same afternoon. The buyers were a retired couple from Oregon. Sweet, wealthy, and looking to relocate somewhere warm. They loved the wraparound porch, the vintage fireplace, and the fact that the neighborhood had a good reputation. What sealed the deal was when I told them the house came with a clean title and motivated seller. I gave them a discount, one that came with a quiet condition. No renewal of the current tenant's stay. I wanted my family out. Wiggly. Peacefully. But permanently. I could have confronted them. I could have shown up with papers in hand and delivered the news face to face. But I didn't want theatrics. I wanted them to feel it the way I had felt it my whole life. Sudden, disorienting, and irreversible. While the closing documents moved through the system, I continued to play the role they expected. I responded to group messages with short, polite replies. I didn't challenge Mom when she asked if I'd restock the freezer before they left for Hawaii. I even sent Lisa a list of kid-friendly movies to play while they packed. They had no idea the house was already sold. That a closing date was scheduled for the day after their return. That an eviction notice would be taped to the front door before their plane even landed. And I didn't feel guilty. Not one bit. Because guilt is what they had used to control me for years. Guilt over being single. Over not giving them grandchildren. over not being as successful as Lisa or as laid back as Jack. Guilt that was spoon-fed in casserole dishes and passive-aggressive phone calls and birthday cards that always arrived a day late, if at all. I remembered one Christmas when Mom gave Lisa a diamond pendant from all of us, even though I'd never pitched in. When I asked, she shrugged and said, "You wouldn't know what to buy her anyway." I gave Lisa a handwritten poem that year. She never read it. So no guilt. Just clarity. They saw me as an asset. A resource. A tool. But never a person. Never a daughter. And now they'd learn what it felt like to lose something without warning. Something they thought was theirs but never truly was. I walked by the house once, the day before the notice went up. It looked the same. Familiar. But hollow. Like a stage set no longer in use. The curtains were drawn. The porch light still flickered. And for the first time I didn't feel like it was home. It wasn't mine anymore. And soon it wouldn't be theirs either. They left on a Thursday. Lisa posted a boomerang on Instagram from the airport. Matching floral luggage, her husband making a goofy face, the kids clinging to their stuffed animals. "Aloha baby," the caption read, followed by a string of hibiscus emojis. Jack shared a blurry selfie with Dad at the gate holding up boarding passes. "Family first," he wrote with zero irony. I watched it all unfold on my phone in silence, sitting at my kitchen table sipping coffee from a chipped mug that nobody ever gifted me. At 3:06 p.m. I drove to their house. The house I used to call my childhood home, the one my parents now believed belonged to them. The Oregon couple had already signed the final documents. I carried the envelope in my purse. Notarized, sealed, final. I walked up the steps I used to sit on every Halloween handing out candy, and I taped the envelope to the door. Then beneath it I carefully pinned a bright orange eviction notice. The kind that gets your attention even from the driveway. I didn't text them. Not right away. I waited until their plane was airborne, just a few hours into what they believed would be a week of my ties, massages, and pretending I didn't exist. Then I sent one photo to the family group chat. It was a shot of their front porch, the for sale sign now gone, replaced with a close-up of the eviction notice fluttering in the breeze. No caption. Just the image. The chat exploded in minutes. "Lisa, what the hell is this?" "Jack, is this a joke?" "Mom, Christina, please explain right now." "Dad, we'll deal with this when we're back. Do not touch our things." I waited. I let them stew. Then when the typing bubbles finally stopped blinking, I sent a single message. "You stole my money. You planned your paradise without me. You used me for years. You thought I was the help. But I'm the owner." Silence. Then Mom called. I didn't pick up. She called again. 3 times. I let everyone go to voicemail. Finally she texted me directly. "How could you do this to your family?" I stared at those words, my fingers poised over the screen. I thought about how I was always the one expected to be the bigger person. The one who let things slide. Who made excuses. Who cleaned up quietly. How I had been treated like a placeholder in my own bloodline. And I typed. "You taught me how. I learned from the best." Then I blocked the entire thread. Mom, Dad, Lisa, Jack. All of them. My phone went quiet for the first time in years. No more last-minute babysitting requests. No more guilt-laced group photos where I stood behind someone else's family. No more subtle digs about how you'd understand if you had kids, or maybe it's time you settled down. Just silence. I stood by my window that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, washing Charleston in a golden haze. The new homeowners would be moving in next month. They'd plant fresh flowers, repaint the shutters, maybe even replace that sagging porch swing. But whatever they did, it would be theirs. Mine. I had something better. Freedom. I didn't owe anyone a thing anymore. 3 weeks later, I stood on a rocky cliff in southern Iceland, the wind biting at my cheeks as I watched waves crash against the black sand. I'd always wanted to see the northern lights, but I never thought I'd come here alone. Or rather by myself, but not alone. Not anymore. I had booked the ticket 2 days after the house officially closed. One way. No return flight. I didn't tell anyone. There was no one left to tell. The air smelled like salt and ice and volcanic stone. It smelled like possibility. I stayed at a small guest house owned by an elderly woman named Margaret, who had lived on the island her whole life. Her hands were rough, her voice soft, and she served the best lamb stew I'd ever tasted. On my second night there, we sat in front of a crackling fire and she asked in her lilting English, "So what brought you all this way?" I hesitated for a moment. Then I said, "I just got tired of being invisible." She nodded slowly. "You left them. They never saw me in the first place." She reached over, poured me more tea and said, "Then you've finally come home." That line stuck with me. In the week since I left Charleston, the only message that reached me was from my grandmother's old hospice nurse. A picture of her at a beach bar holding up a piña colada. The caption said, "Your grandma would have applauded every step. Cheers to finally choosing yourself." I hadn't responded, but I kept the photo. My family? Nothing. Maybe they were still reeling, scrambling to figure out housing legal loopholes, or just how they managed to lose everything in one quiet act of rebellion. Or maybe they were too proud to reach out. I didn't care. For once, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I wasn't staying close just in case they needed me. I wasn't explaining myself. I was breathing. Some nights I walked along the coast until my cheeks burned with wind and cold. I journaled in cafes. I started painting again, something I hadn't touched since college. My lines were shaky at first, but they held color. Life. Pain. And joy. One afternoon I sat with a group of travelers around a fire pit, and we went around sharing the wildest thing we'd ever done. One woman said she left her fiancé at the altar. A man admitted he had changed his name and disappeared from a toxic tech startup. When it was my turn, I smiled and said, "I sold my family's house while they were in Hawaii and blocked them all." There was silence. Then applause. Someone shouted, "Hell yes," and another woman raised her glass. I laughed until my ribs hurt. Because for the first time in my life, my story didn't sound tragic. It sounded brave. I thought of Lisa, probably still complaining about how unfair it all was. Of Jack, who probably still didn't understand what he did wrong. Of my parents, stunned and confused, wondering how their most loyal daughter turned into a ghost. But I wasn't a ghost. I was the flame. And maybe I had burned the bridge, but only because they'd built it out of kindling and lit the match themselves. I don't know where I'll go next. Maybe Berlin. Maybe Kyoto. Maybe I'll stay here and work at a little bookstore, serve soup with Margaret, watch the lights shift overhead each night like a living painting. What I do know is this. I'm not going back. Not to that porch. Not to that role. Not to the girl who thought being needed was the same as being loved. They called it betrayal. I call it liberation. Family isn't who expects you to sacrifice without question. Family is who claps when you finally walk away.